We're working on getting things set up here. It's our first ever podcast.
I think
You'd think we would know better by
I need
now.
baby Boba Fett. Just a sec. Here.
So this is the initial 24 gauge podcast. Julia, you want to set us up?
Hello there, and welcome to the 24 Gauge Podcast. We
Sexy.
are your hosts, Julia and Dave Grant.
Hello.
Hello. And this being our first episode, it is going to be a bit of a get to know you episode.
As well as a bit of a gong show.
Probably all of the above. So stick around for what might be an amusing, humorous, laugh at us type of ride.
You want to just give a quick blurb of who we are?
Well, sure. I can do that. Dave and I are both registered nurses in Canada. We are both actually oncology nurses. We work on the same unit in a regional hospital. We have a combined 25 years of nursing experience between us. We both have baccalaureate degrees. We're both nationally certified oncology specialists with the CNA, and we are here to talk about the nitty-gritty at the intersection of nursing and life.
To be fair, my conch certification has expired.
No, mine's getting close.
And I
gotta
have
work on
no
that.
desire to rewrite it because it does nothing for me in my job.
All right. Well, that was not a glowing endorsement for the CNA specialty program, but maybe your hospital supports it better than ours.
I think you should write the CNA program once in whatever specialty you're in. Sorry, I'm just listening to see if our baby boy just woke up again. I think that you should write the CNA once, get your certification one time, just to get a really in-depth understanding of your specialty.
That's a good point.
And then maybe later on in your career, if it's been like, a decade or you've changed specialties, maybe rewrite it to be more up to date again. But I don't think you need to keep it ongoing.
Okay. Well, that was a nice little aside there.
If you hear hisses, we're good.
Okay, if you hear hissing, that's our baby monitor that we're checking in on our 2-year-old son who doesn't want to nap today.
So let's talk about that real quick. So we're a couple.
We are a couple. Last I checked.
As far as I know.
Yes.
You were actually my student. That's how we met.
We did meet at work. I was his student. I worked with him every shift for 4 months in my final preceptorship of nursing school.
Nothing inappropriate during nursing. It was afterwards.
Absolutely. God, I was so stressed during those 4 months. I couldn't have focused on anything romantic.
And I was so bored, so all I could do was focus on her. So it worked out.
There you go. So we started dating well after I had finished my program and written my national exam, etc. But we were still working together.
Mm-hmm.
So we kept it on the real low down for that first couple months, the first summer, I think.
Yeah, the first summer.
Right? Because, if something hadn't worked out, I probably would have been finding another job. And also, I didn't want that kind of spotlight on me. We both work on a pretty small unit. So that is how we met. And we got engaged and married. And now 8.5 years later, here we are.
Here we are. Still working together.
Still working together.
In fact, Julia is technically kind of my supervisor at the moment. Although we had to get special rules in place for that, but that's all right.
We did have to. But yeah, making it work in the workplace.
Yeah.
I think that's something that's fairly unique about our relationship. And not a lot of people can say that they share a workplace with their spouse, especially in a professional context.
Well, and especially like there are other nurses married to nurses or nurses married to doctors, etc. But like working together on the same unit is not really heard of at all. So it actually has like caused some issues in how our employer deals with us through the years, just to make sure everybody's on the up and up, and there's no issues when it comes to discipline and whatnot. Not that we've had to be disciplined.
We haven't warranted any discipline. Let's let's put that out there so people don't start getting the wrong idea about us. We're super professional at work, and I'd like to make. Well, I'd like to. Okay.
Oh, as a couple, yes.
Yeah.
As an individual, I'm not very professional.
I'm very professional, and we as a couple are very professional. And as evidence thereof, there are still people that we've been working with for years that are just finding out that we are married to each other.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
And I think it's very humorous also that when I talk about my spouse at work, if I don't say your name and I just say, oh, my husband, this or that or whatever, when I'm talking with my coworkers, half the time you can see something click in people's minds at some point that they're like, "Oh, you're talking about Dave." Like, yes,
Yeah.
Dave, your coworker Dave.
It's funny. I think our patients know that we're married quicker than our coworkers sometimes.
Yeah, that's because you make a point to tell all of
Yeah,
them.
it's true. I'd be like, "Oh, my wife's gonna come and see you later," and then I think it's really funny when they get all like shocked that we work together and stuff.
Yeah.
But then they brag about me to you, so it's fine.
They do.
Especially the little old ladies.
I don't know
They love me.
how you make all the little old ladies fall in love with you.
They're the only ones I really care about. No, I'm just kidding.
I was gonna say though, you come off as like fairly like blunt and gruff to everybody else, but
Yeah.
somehow the little old ladies just love you.
They just see through the bullshit right away.
They do. You're such a big teddy bear. All right, so there's a bit to know about us as a couple, and I'm sure you'll find out more about us as we go along.
So why are we doing a podcast then?
Why are we doing a podcast, Dave Grant?
Well, okay, so we were in Mexico
We were in Mexico.
listening to the Pillow Talk podcast, which if you haven't heard it, you should listen to it
You
because
really
it's
should
really
look
good. I
up
don't know who they're.
Vanessa and Xander Martin. Ooh,
Yeah, there we go.
say that better.
They're really it's quite a fun podcast. I'm not going to spoil it, but go and check some of the titles, and you'll be like, "Oh my god, what are they listening to?" Um, and then I've done YouTube in the past. I have a channel that is I haven't posted in like a year, but it's still getting followers. That's awesome. DaveGrantCooks.com. And then Julia has interest in writing some sort of nursing book, like a.
I just have interest in writing in general.
And then we like, well, why don't we do this together? We had a baby, at the very beginning of the pandemic. We're both creative people, but because of the pandemic, we've kind of been inside, and with a toddler, we haven't been able to have a lot of energy to do extra things. So, but we have nap times, and we're like, well, let's do podcasts during nap times. It doesn't take much, and it's something we can do together. As opposed, my YouTube was usually kick everybody out so I could have the kitchen to myself to cook and stuff.
Yeah, especially to get rid of the baby noise in the background too.
So we'll see how it goes. We have lots of fun topics that we're going to talk about. Julia is going to be the researcher.
Dave's going to bring the opinions.
Yeah, Julia's going to be prepared, and I'm going to be like the old man Muppets and just complain and give my opinion whether right or wrong, which we'll be told when the way is better.
We are married. Got the freedom to do so.
So yeah, that's the reason behind it. We're both nurses. We've had a lot of experience in nursing, specifically oncology, but just in nursing in general. And we just wanted to start something creative together, talk about who we are, what we're passionate about. Because nursing is not just a career; it is really a lifestyle. You have shift work, and your life does not revolve around the 9 to 5 and all sorts of things that we'll get into in later podcasts. But yeah, so we just thought we'd just share who we are and our lives and our passions and find something creative to do together.
Plus, are we really millennials if we don't have a podcast at some point in our lives? Like, if two millennials have a conversation and they don't record it and turn it into a podcast, did it really happen?
Well, am I millennial or am I a Gen?
You're
what am I,
like
a
right
Gen
at the
Xer?
border. You're 1980, so
Yeah.
you're right at the border of like Gen X and millennial.
Yeah.
You display characteristics of both.
Well, all you do is work with millennials and.
No, we work with a lot of Gen Zers.
Oh, see, I can't even. I'm so old. I can't even keep track of the generations anymore.
All right. Well, why don't we dig a little bit more into this, the start of our nursing careers then?
Sure.
So, Dave, how long have you been in nursing, and what has your clinical experience been to date?
So well, a little backstory first, I guess, on why I became a nurse. I was living in Hawaii working with an organization called Youth with a Mission, or YWAM. Being a beach bum, I ran the kitchen, I cooked a couple times a day, and then I just surfed and hung out and played beach volleyball and stuff. And my parents said, stop being a beach bum, get a real job. And I really thought, well, I want to move back to Hawaii. So they introduced me to a family friend of theirs whose son was a travel nurse in New York City at the time. And this was, the idea started before 9/11. Anyways, it was fairly easy to get your green card as a nurse back then. I said, yeah, I'll go to school, get my green card, and then move back to Hawaii and do nursing. So that was the whole catalyst. I had never thought about nursing before. I had to have my lifeguard and some first aid and whatnot through the years, but never thought about nursing as a career. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was quite happy running a kitchen and surfing. That was what else do you really need in life?
It's still the dream, let's
It's
be
still the
honest.
dream. Um, but I said, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I should have some sort of career. I'm in my mid 20s now. I should do something. So I came back to Canada. I went to school. Um, and I graduated in 2008 and I started working. I did oncology my whole fourth year of school, my clinical and preceptorship. And then I graduated on the Friday, and I think I was working on the Monday in a full time line, which is unheard of now. And then, yeah, Bob's your uncle. I never planned on oncology, never planned on nursing. It just kind of like fell in my lap, both things. I love oncology because every day is a little different, and every patient is different. Cancer affects everything, so you see everything. So everybody always asks, like, do you want to do another specialty? Would you do emerge? Blah blah blah. But I find oncology is exciting enough because you do get to see all systems of the body in one form or another in our oncology experience, as opposed to specializing in like renal or surgical or something like that.
Hmm. So, wow, I can't believe I don't know the answer to this question, but have you always only worked in oncology, or did you have any general medical experience along the way mixed in there?
Actually working,
Yeah, like after
yeah,
grad.
for 6 months when I first moved to BC.
So,
Uh,
so
so
Dave's
I
originally from Ontario.
so I moved from Ontario, where I worked on a really well established 44-bed unit where we did everything, oncology wise, the radiation, drinks, bone marrow transplants, the whole thing. And then I come to BC, and there wasn't the oncology unit was just starting. It was only 5 beds, like I think less than 10 nurses. It wasn't really established yet. It was mostly symptom management. So I picked up there once in a while, casual. But there wasn't actually a line yet. So for the first 6 months, I worked on the medical floors and bounced around to various medical floors and emerge in the hospital before they expanded the oncology unit to the 10 beds it is now and got a line.
So how many years have you been nursing now?
So 20,
Do the math. Click, click, click.
14 and a half years, 15 years this spring.
Okay. And out of all of that, only like everything but 6 months was in oncology for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
What about for you?
Well, I graduated high school knowing that I was really good at sciences, but not really knowing exactly what I was interested in. And I got a full ride out of high school because I'm that big of a nerd. And so I took advantage of it and I went to university for a solid year. And I like crammed my schedule full of all first year science classes. I actually had to get dean's permission to do the courses that I was doing. And shocker, I burnt myself out because I didn't know why I was doing it and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I took some time off. I traveled. I worked for a little bit. I got, kind of some life experience. I also did YWAM, but only for 6 months. And I after that came back to Canada and I was really trying to sort out, okay, I need something, even if it's not like the be all and end all for me. I need some place to start. I need a skill. I need something that is, that I can make a career or a life or even just a job out of for now. And in a short period of time, like in a matter of weeks, I think, there were like 3 people from very separate areas of my life who were all like, have you considered nursing? And I was always of the impression that if you wanted to go into nursing, you had to know at the age of like 4. Like it was a
Yeah.
calling. And you had to be that like,
Your mom was a nurse and you're a
yeah,
nurse
like
and your
so many.
grandma was a nurse. Like, yeah.
Yes. Like it was this generational thing. It was a
Mhm.
calling that you knew, and you had to be this really like sweet, tender, loving, caring person. And like I'm not quite that like wonderful, loving, nurturing
Neither
person.
one of us would term each other as
Like
the lovey-dovey,
lovey-dovey
wonderful, caring.
nurturing.
Yeah.
We care about people. Let's make that very clear. We do care. We just, we're not the
Not
like
what we would think of as your
that
Florence Nightingale type
like
nurse.
that angel in waiting type of nurse. We're
Yeah.
neither that type of person. So I had always kind of written nursing off, being like, well, that's not for me. But then, like I said, like 3 separate people really encouraged me to consider nursing. And one in particular was like a really good mentor to me throughout my university years. So I took her insight into it really profoundly. So I applied. I had all the academic backgrounds and prereqs and whatnot to get in pretty quickly because there was competitive entry at the school that I went to rather than a wait list like a lot of other universities had at the time. And throughout university, I worked as an employed nurse. I tried surgical rotations. I did a medical rotation on a unit that was split between medical and oncology. So I did get some oncology experience in school. And then when it came to time to choose my final preceptorship, I had heard really good things about the nurses on the oncology unit in the hospital that was closest to me, just from other people I knew who were already working in nursing. And I kind of figured, I'm like, well, cancer kind of touches on everything. I feel like in your career, you're never not going to benefit from at least some knowledge of oncology at this point, just based on where things are in our healthcare system. And I'd rather be, as a student in my final semester on a unit where people have worked to get into that specialty area, have that extra kind of degree of passion or commitment to what they're doing, and really care about being skilled in an area. I feel like that creates an environment for really good mentorship. So I put oncology as my first choice. I landed on our unit. I got stuck with Dave.
Sucker.
And I
What
have
it would have been totally if you were with a different preceptor, we probably wouldn't be together.
probably
It was
not.
it was those first 4 months of like intense night shifts and codes and just
Or
the
even just
intensity of the work.
And
And
even just the boredom of the middle of the night where you just
yeah,
like you talk to stay awake and to get through the night.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we probably not because it was a really intense getting to know you period.
Which means you probably wouldn't be on oncology.
Well,
You
I might have
because you
stayed in
yeah, but
oncology.
you were wanting to go and travel after.
Maybe I might have tried travel nursing if
If
we
you
didn't
if you
become
didn't
a
have
thing.
this hot piece of ass at home, you would have probably left already.
I might have, but I haven't. I've stayed, and I think I stayed for very sim other than the fact that we're together, and it's kind of nice to like have that
It's kind of
kind of
nice that we're together.
no, it's kind of nice that we work together. I like that. I like
Yeah.
that about us. I like that we can share a workplace, and I like that if I come home from a hard day, I can say one thing and you understand all the subtext and context
Mhm.
that goes along with that. I don't have to spend a lot of time explaining. You just know what I went through or what the day was like or whatever. You can just completely empathize off
Yeah.
of that. And, yeah. And I like oncology, I think, for similar reasons that you do. Even though we work on a fairly small unit, you see just about everything that you would see in any particular area of medicine, and usually all on top of each other. Our patients are quite complex. It always is very academically demanding, um, caring for our patients and trying to understand where they're at and pick up on things early if they're, starting to crash or if we've got emergencies coming out. And I think that kind of mental stimulation has kept me really engaged and interested.
Mhm.
And now I'm at a point in my career. So now I've been nursing. It will be 10 years for me this spring. I'm at a point in my career where I feel like I have more to offer in terms of like a teaching and mentorship role, and even like a leadership role in our place of work. And I think that adds a lot of work satisfaction
Yeah.
for me too. All right. There you
Cool.
go. That's our that's a
That's
really
who we
long way
are.
to
As nurses, that's who we are. That's kind of how we
yeah.
met.
So I this is a case in point of who does the prep and who doesn't here. Julia is sitting here with like a list of prompting questions in case we run out of things to talk about, and Dave's like, I'm just winging it.
Yep.
Um, so I think we kind of already answered this. Did anyone encourage you to go into nursing? And you were,
Can you just move your mic, like angle it down a little bit?
is
There.
that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll
Keep going.
edit that out.
Or just leave it
Or
in. Keep
leave
going.
it in. So, did anyone discourage you from going into nursing at any point? At like either the start of your career or before you even went to school?
No, because I didn't really talk to. I didn't have friends. I still don't.
Yes, I maintain the social life for both of our
Like when I
sakes.
was growing up, I had quite the social group. But once I moved away to Hawaii, obviously everybody started university stuff, and I lived you know, in Hawaii versus Ontario, so you lose base and stuff. This is before, you know, Facebook and all that kind of stuff happened. So it's easy to lose touch with people. Plus, I'm not one to really reach out and stuff if you're not around me on a regular basis. So I really had my family and one or two other people, and that was it. So yeah, there wasn't really anybody to influence. Plus, I started later in life. I went to school when I was 24. I started university, so was also past the point where
Oh,
I
I was
was
24
allowing other
too.
people to influence me.
Was I 24? I was 23.
Mm.
Never mind.
When you started nursing,
When I started nursing.
yeah,
Yeah.
because you did university for a couple of years and YWAM and stuff. in between all that
Yeah.
before nursing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was a few years out of high school
Hmm.
also. Also, there's a good question. Um, do you feel that having life experience before going into nursing school and having at least been out of high school for a little bit, do you feel like that really benefited your career, or do you feel like you kind of wished you had known coming out of high school and just gone straight into it?
I think for most people, taking a year or two of taking the gap year
Mm-hmm.
or gap years
Mm-hmm.
is the way that it should be. I don't think most people coming out of high school have any idea who they are or what they want to be doing for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean that you have to do nursing for 30 years. A lot of nurses don't. But I think just in general, a gap year or two, just to go explore the world. You've been in school your entire life. You've never really learned who you are outside of your parents and your family and school and whatnot. I think it's important to take time off and just learn who you are as a burgeoning adult in this crazy world that we have. And I think it was definitely beneficial for me. I would never have chosen nursing out of high school. I would have probably been a police officer or something and had a whole different trajectory, which would have been fine. But I really love the life that I have now. And it only came about because I took time off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I would say I feel pretty similarly. In particular, with nursing, having at least a gap year and some life experience outside of high schools. I mean, like, how many of us as teenagers really get out of our own heads and our own perspectives to be able to understand people? And nursing as a profession requires a lot of empathy. I think, like, it just,
Hmm.
you have to be able to meet people where they are at to provide really like good, competent, appropriate healthcare. And you have to you have to be able to at least empathize with different life circumstances and a lot of times people in crisis. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of health promotion and meeting people in good places throughout their healthcare journey that is in healthcare, but a lot of what we do is meeting people in places of crisis. And I think you got to have a bit of life experience to know yourself to be able to deal with that.
Yeah.
Um, and I agree with you that nursing isn't necessarily, I mean, I went into it not even thinking that it was the be all and end all for me. Who knows? I mean, now that I'm in it, I feel that it's a big part of my identity now. And I could see myself finding ways to stay in nursing and keeping it an exciting career and do that for the rest of my working years, if you
Hmm.
will. Um, but I went into it even thinking like, well, this isn't necessarily the be all and end all for me, but it's a great starting point. It's a degree that's a job ticket.
Yeah.
I don't have to go through 4 years of university and then be like, okay, now what do I do with this liberal arts degree or whatever?
Yeah.
Not to knock the liberal arts, but nursing,
It's very rare to come out of school with a undergraduate degree and
yeah,
start working.
yeah, and literally have a career, mapped out in front of you that you can take in a lot of different directions, but
And that won't
start
just pay the
immediately
bill,
with that
and it
degree.
just doesn't just pay the bills. It actually lets you have a life.
Yeah.
Like it pays decent.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna say it pays well because cable repairmen make more than nurses, but
Mm-hmm.
it pays enough that we have the life that we want to have, and
Mm-hmm.
we're not struggling most of the time as long as we're responsible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard to get with an undergraduate degree.
That is. So yeah, I think that's a plus
Hmm.
with our careers. And yeah, who knows what doors it opens down the road, but
Yeah.
it's created for us, at least at this point, a, a really enjoyable life where we feel, I don't know, we both have jobs that challenge us and we're not totally bored at all the time and give us lots of different opportunities for change if we want it
Hmm.
and the opportunity to hopefully have an impact and make a difference. But then our life outside of nursing is also one that we can enjoy with travel or, being able to do extra hobbies and things or sit around and do a podcast, that sort of thing.
So let me ask you that then. So you've been doing this for 10 years.
Yeah.
If you could change career trajectories, would you still like if money say wasn't the object and if you could be making the same money doing whatever you wanted, would you stay nursing?
Hmm.
You maybe change something in nursing, being like more of an educator or whatever, but would you stay nursing or would you completely change where you're at?
I feel like nursing hits a lot of like, my important core values.
Hmm.
Um, So, like, when you say that, I don't immediately have something else that jumps out in mind in terms of what else I would be doing. So, yeah, I think I would still find ways to use nursing to build my life and career, etc.
Mhm.
I think I probably would go a little bit more along the educational mentorship side of things, whatever that might look like. My mom my mom would love to see me teaching in a classroom because she's always said that that is what's going to happen in my career. And there's part of me that wants to rebel against that and say, I will never be an instructor in a classroom. Number one, I hate public speaking. Um, but who knows? That might be part of it at some point. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, nursing just it fits a lot of things for me. So I think it's a place that I'll probably stay,
Mm.
hopefully. I guess we'll see what the future holds. I mean, the last 2 years, 2.5 years now, have just been absolutely nuts in our profession.
Yeah.
A lot of people have left, moved on, tried completely different things than what they were doing at the beginning of the pandemic. A lot of change has happened. So I guess
Mhm.
we'll see how our healthcare system recovers and moves forward from the pandemic too, and whether it just becomes a really unhealthy place to work as a
Yeah.
professional. So
Yeah.
well, that's a good segue to move into talking about a little bit about nursing through the pandemic.
Sure.
Um,
It
and
sucks.
yeah. So what was your personal experience of working the pandemic, and how do you feel that the pandemic has changed our profession? Because that's a pretty big like signpost, turning post, I don't know what you would call it, fork in the road, just like a timestamp marker on the career is the pandemic.
Mhm. Um, oh man. Yeah, well, like I said before, our boy was born March 11th, the day they declared a pandemic.
Yeah, I was literally coming out of an emergency C-section as the World Health Organization was hosting a press conference and called COVID-19 a global pandemic.
Like I think the first day, well, the morning that Ethan was born, we were allowed to have visitors,
Mhm.
and by the evening they had shut the hospital down.
Yeah,
Which was just really crazy.
it was so bizarre.
So when I talk about nursing in the pandemic, I also roll it into having a brand new baby boy at home during a pandemic and going through fatherhood, which that alone is extremely tiring. But then you compound it with nursing in a pandemic, which had all its own stressors. Like nursing itself is a stressful time, is a stressful career.
Mhm.
But I've been doing it long enough and whatnot that it wasn't overly taxing. But then you throw in the pandemic and just even the idea of wearing a mask for 12 hours a day. Like we're used to it now, but I remember going back to work after I think I was off for the first 5 weeks. Missed the actual like real craziness of when the pandemic first started, when people were trying to figure out what that meant for the hospital.
I mean, that was when we were still everyone was still like washing groceries and things in those
Yeah.
first few weeks when we had no idea what we were dealing with.
But when I came back, it was like I knew I had to wear a mask and whatnot, and it was just the idea of that mask for 12 hours, it would drive you insane for the first year. Wearing a mask that long was just it just added a stressor you didn't even realize was there. And like now we're 2.5 years in, wherever we're at now with the pandemic, whatever is happening, it's kind of seems like it's all normalized. Um, but there's been a few days in the last couple months where we've gone back to just having 10 patients and not having things been crazy and no COVID patients on the floor and stuff.
By
And
10 patients, that's 100% of our capacity. Normally, we've been at like 120 to 130% of our capacity
yeah,
on the
on our
unit.
floor, like our
Yeah.
floor, like we're a small unit. We only have 3 nurses on days and nights and 10 beds, but it's because our patients are so complicated. So when you add an extra 2 or 3 patients to that, but not extra nurses, it's quite a bit extra work.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, just the stress of the pandemic. Like I was saying, so when we have had those days where it's kind of reminiscent of pre-pandemic times, the new grads that we work with who've been on the floor for 2 or 3 years are like, we're so bored. This is so like quiet. Nurses shouldn't say quiet, but I'm not at work, so I don't care. If it screws people up at my work today, that's not my problem.
Sorry, guys.
Um, but and I'm like, this is what it used to be like. You actually used to have time to think about what you were doing, not just but reactive, but be proactive,
Mhm.
and could actually sit down and talk to the doctors and really get into the best clinical um, processes for your patients and stuff. And not have things just kind of jump out at you, but recognize that they were happening before they became a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't get to do that anymore. We're
Mm-mm.
so busy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that especially I could only imagine what it's like for the new grads that they don't have the experience to rely on. That, after 15 years, my instincts still help me catch things
Mm-hmm.
before they become an issue. But you're way behind the curve than what we used to be pre-pandemic. So it's been stressful. It's been manageable. But definitely, everybody's sick time's up. My sick time's up. It's harder at home. You come home and you're just wiped. Um, like I was on an SSRI. Is that what
Mm-hmm.
an
Mm-hmm.
SSRI for a while to help cope and stuff? And it just the whole thing. Oh, sorry, I'm supposed to talk into Mike. Julie's reminding me. I get self conscious talking about myself, so I start looking all over the place. Anyways, yeah, it's been a stressful time. You don't think about it now 3 years in because it's all normalized.
Yeah, it
And
is
so you
pretty
can
much.
say it's stressful, but you don't really realize how stressful it is
Mm-hmm.
because your body's becoming used to it. It's like I kind of think of like when you're on a highway and when you're first driving and you're doing 100 and then you're doing 110 and 120, 140 some people in the mountains.
Only once.
Um that I caught. Um, but your brain gets used to it, your body gets used to it. You react more at those speeds, and then when all of a sudden you go from doing 140 to you get off the highway and you're doing 50,
City
50
driving
feels
again.
like you're walking. It feels so slow. And I feel like that's kind of been the pandemic. Our body's gotten so used to these high levels of stress that when it's normal, we're like, well, this isn't right. And now we're not doing enough work. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, we were doing enough work before and now we're doing too much and we're burning ourselves out and we're
Yeah.
not even noticing it. It's the frog in the boiling pot of water sort of
Yeah.
deal,
Yeah, definitely.
which I think is what you have seen that with our colleagues.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it's like things snap and people are not at work anymore and stuff. And it's like, why? And it's because for them, the pot's boiled over.
Yeah. And that's happened to a lot of like really good quality people that we work with.
Yeah.
And, throughout our hospital, I think throughout the profession in general, just a lot of
Yeah.
people got burnt out. It was so much stress for so long, and the impacts on their health just got to be too much, especially, if you have stressful things going on outside of work.
Yeah.
So, my experience of the pandemic was a bit different because I was off for the first 15 months, I think. And, just having had a new baby, which was its own very stressful time. And,
Oh yeah. We couldn't see our midwives or our doctors or anything that was supposed to
anything.
happen.
Yeah. Like I had major abdominal surgery and I didn't even get follow up with a surgeon afterwards.
Yeah. They're like, see you later.
Yeah. They're like, you're a nurse. You know how to deal with this. I'm like,
Literally,
yeah.
they would say that.
They literally told
We
me
don't we
that.
don't have time for it. You're a nurse, figure it out.
Yeah. Or like, we're not seeing patients at all right now because no one was doing anything in person,
Yeah.
So that was really stressful as a new parent. If I had questions or if things weren't going quite right or our son wasn't gaining weight or he was having trouble feeding, things like that, there was nothing. And there was the perpetual fear of like, how many people do we involve in our life and put at risk and or put our son at risk? We're
Yeah.
already a pretty high risk with Dave being in the hospital full time, you know, and having a newborn for ourselves that felt very high risk. And we also didn't want to be the one who potentially passed anything on to anybody else.
Hmm.
So that was just very stressful as a parent at home during that time and not having that support period as a new parent. Like I think anyone else who became a parent, especially like in the early days of that pandemic there, they always say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, we're all sitting at home being like, where's our village? We don't get a village because we don't get to do
To
anything.
to be fair, Grandma Matt, if you're listening to this, we know you're downstairs. We know you're our village. We
We
appreciate it.
definitely appreciate. We were
But
lucky.
you shouldn't have been our only village.
Yeah.
It's not a village of 3 people.
Yes.
It should have been much more.
Well, just clarifying that Dave's parents live in our basement suite. So
Yeah.
we were one of the, the lucky ones, I guess, that we did have some support and help
Well,
at
yeah,
home.
we had a lot of friends who had kids right around the same time as us,
Yep.
and they had no support.
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was really tough. And then I will also say, as someone who I care a lot about my work. I care about what I do. I care about the patients that we take care of, and I really care about the professionals that we work with. And here we were in the middle of this global pandemic where there was just horrific shortages of healthcare workers everywhere. Like I don't know if you guys remember the early days of the pandemic when they were flying in 747s full of doctors and nurses to New York to help out
Hmm.
because people were just dying and they they couldn't there was no one to care for them. Um, and so here we are in the midst of this pandemic with this shortage of healthcare workers, and I am a trained professional. Of all the people in the world, I fit in that category that's ready to help at a time such as this, and I'm at home sitting it out.
Hmm.
And I dealt with a lot of guilt around that, actually. Like, there was a lot of stress of being a new parent, and there was a lot of guilt about not being around for the first, year or so, well into the time when we had vaccines now. Like, I went back to work and we were getting our second doses already.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of more pressure off of like staying apart from people and not getting other people sick and whatnot because now we suddenly had vaccines and that was there to hopefully make a difference
Hmm.
in the long term. So that was like not even being there working. That was kind of part of my experience of the pandemic as a nurse who wasn't in the hospital. All my coworkers are like, be grateful you're not here. And that's, I think that's probably very accurate. Then why add all that extra stress into your life if you didn't need to and enjoy that time with a new baby? You're not going to get that back. Absolutely valid. But I did feel a lot of guilt.
Hmm.
And then when I came back, it was, I talked to other people who had been on mat leaves and come back to nursing, and, they talk about you forget a lot of things, but they come back pretty quickly. And, things will have changed, but you'll reintegrate and whatever. But so much had changed while I was gone.
Hmm.
I had 1,000 emails worth of stuff of new policies and updates to procedures and how we handle this or that, whatever now because of COVID. How do we porter a patient now in the
Yeah.
midst of COVID? How do you order enter this or that into our computer system because of COVID? Like just so much had changed. And so much had changed in terms of like the people makeup of our unit. Like there was at least 40% turnover in our staff while I was gone.
Yeah. In the
And
first, so I've been in BC since 2012.
mm-hmm.
2012?
Yep.
2010.
No,
I moved to
yeah,
BC.
2010.
Started on the unit shortly after that. So let's say 2010. 2022 now. Pandemic started
2020.
2020. So the first 10 years on my unit, the top, so we have 12, 13 lines. The top 6 or 7 lines were the same. So
Mm-hmm.
half the unit were the same old guard that had started the unit.
And we're like experienced oncology nurses
And now
and
there
experienced nurses,
and
period.
now there's 2 original people on the floor in the last 2 years. Everybody else has left from
Yeah.
that it started there.
Yeah. So, and yeah, just that amount of turnover. I mean, getting to know new people, the dynamics have changed. You don't know people's work styles. You don't even know people's names, and
Hmm.
everyone's wearing masks. Like,
Yeah.
there were people, there were people I started working with when I came back from mat leave. I didn't even know what their faces looked like until
Hmm.
like 6 months into being back at work or something like that, when we happened to like catch each other at a moment where somebody had a mask down or we were sitting across the break room from each other, sort of thing. So that was very bizarre experience for me. And then I also felt like pretty alone in that because everybody else was already adjusted to it.
Hmm.
And me being like, oh my God, this is different. This is different.
Hmm.
I'm very overwhelmed by everything that's so different. So I had I don't I don't know if it's unique, but definitely a different pandemic experience than a lot of nurses just because of that mat leave.
Hmm.
So yeah. How do you think the pandemic has changed nursing as a profession?
I don't think it's been good.
I don't think it's been good either.
I don't think, well, for new grads, they're not getting the education or the safe experience that they should have.
No.
They're just getting thrown into the deep end of things.
Like by safe experience, elaborate on that a little bit. What do you mean there?
Well, there's so much turnover. Just like say on our floor, new grads are working with new grads. People who've been on the floor for 6 months are teaching people who just started, and that shouldn't happen because the person being there for 6 months is still learning their job.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of the older people have moved on or left or, retired and whatnot.
Mhm.
And I know it's not like this on every floor in every hospital. I'm just talking from our experience on our floor.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit of the blind leading the blind sometimes. Everybody's doing the best job that they can, but nobody has the extra time to sit down and talk about, hey, we should be doing it like this, or when this happened, we should have been more aware and on the ball doing this. It's very rare that we have those times to actually reflect. There's no time to reflect anymore.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think that's something that's really important in your own professional development is being able to reflect on how things work because that's how you grow. That's how
Hmm.
you build those instincts that you were talking about earlier.
And if you do have the time to reflect in those rare moments that they happen, you're so burnt out. Nobody has the capacity to do
Yeah,
that
no one
anymore.
has the emotional energy, especially like the more experienced nurses who should be the ones who are, using that experience to mentor our new
Mm.
grads, our new nurses, telling them not just like what to do, but the why of what we're doing. So we're
Yeah.
helping them build their instincts and, their ability to make solid clinical
Hmm.
judgments and make them in a faster time frame.
Especially on like such a complicated unit of oncology.
Yeah.
It's not just you're in for a flu, we'll give you antibiotics to go home. It's, oh,
You
you have the
don't give
flu, you
antibiotics for a
have
flu,
cancer, and
Dave.
then you have the flu. Well, then that means 10 other things are going to go wrong, and now we have
Yeah.
to sort that all out.
Yeah.
It's just there it's a much steeper learning curve for the new grads, but it's also missing a lot of learning that should be going on.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of safety nets. And like
Yeah.
I think when you're saying like they're missing that safe experience, by that I mean like there's not the safety net of either like say being supernumerary in a mentorship type relationship with a more experienced nurse or just having that extra time to get adjusted to your role
Hmm.
and the workload and stuff, being able to start with like a lighter workload and
Yep.
work
Yep.
into the heavier, more numbers, more complex patients, et cetera, et cetera. There's none of those safety nets really available to a lot of people who are starting the profession now. And that makes those first couple of years so much harder because
Hmm.
I think my wise preceptor would always say that your nursing degree is just a license to start learning. Like
Yeah.
you've laid a foundation of things that you're going to need to piece together to do your job, but actually learning how to do your job only happens when you get in and do it.
Yep.
And, learning to do that well, you can be the smartest, most studious person in the classroom and in university, but, you can't just learn our profession by book. You need the experience to help you guide through different circumstances and how to pick out what's important and what's actually applicable to a situation and what's not. That experience is invaluable and you can only get that experience with time.
Well,
So,
and another thing with the pandemic and with what we're just talking about now is so yeah, so you have these inexperienced new grad nurses starting. They're starting with more patients, heavier patients than they would normally start with
mhm.
less resources for as a safety net. And because of the pandemic, everybody stopped going to the doctors for the first year or two.
Yeah.
And so now people who should have been caught at stage one cancers, you just in regular checkup and stuff, are now coming in stage four,
Yeah.
and they're end of life or they're extremely complicated and widespread cancer
Mhm.
that has way more symptoms, has to have heavier protocols, more like stronger protocols with way more side effects. And we're still expecting our new grads to be able to manage that,
Yeah. It's
and
just a
it's
lot.
just everything about the pandemic has compressed nurses. I think the nurses who survived the pandemic and continue to nurse through it when things settle down, if things settle down, whatever that looks like, I think they will be some of the strongest generation of nurses because they've been put into the fire right away.
Maybe. There's part of me that wants to agree with that because I look at the people that we're surrounded by and I go, these are people who are made of strong stuff. These are people who are determined to keep
Hmm.
going and make a difference. These are people with, you know, really smart brains and strong hearts.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think that that adage, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, is necessarily true. Sometimes we just end up with trauma baggage. And I think nursing
Hmm.
as a profession is going to have a lot of trauma baggage from the first couple of years of the pandemic and however much longer it really takes us to settle out as a healthcare system. Because, like you said, what's happening with oncology patients, we're facing like a tsunami of
Hmm.
all these people who are getting later diagnoses and coming in so much more sick. Well, that's happening with a lot of other more chronic illnesses or just impactful health statuses, whether that be cardiac or renal or whatever,
Yeah.
throughout the healthcare system.
Yeah.
And like we were saying before, like a lot of people left or moved on, or like people retired. People just completely quit the profession and found something else to do with their
Mm-hmm.
lives. We've experienced an extreme brain drain and just a sharp decrease in the numbers of healthcare workers.
Yeah.
We just don't have enough people. So we're always constantly strained these days with, critically short staffing all the time. It paints a really dire picture
It
of
does.
healthcare. We're not in a good place right now, but I will tell you for sure, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I know that there are really good people still in healthcare. And I really hope moving forward that we will, as a profession, keep finding ways to keep each other healthy and strong and doing the work that we do
Mm-hmm.
and building towards a healthier healthcare system for patients and for people to work in.
Yeah.
Maybe that's naive, but that's what I want. That's my vision. That's what I'm
So,
working towards.
um, with that, then,
Hmm.
sorry, I was not being a good active listener.
Uh-oh, darn.
I had my own thought that I wanted to get across.
Okay, go ahead.
Um, Double-edged sword though about this.
Hmm.
So, uh, one of the good things that I think has come about in the pandemic, because let's not talk about just how it's been hard on nursing. It
Hmm.
has. That's predominantly the way it is.
Hmm.
And this is a bit of a good out of bad sort of situation. But I feel like the nursing profession, healthcare field in general, has become much more acutely aware and positive in how they deal with healthcare workers' mental health. I feel
Hmm.
like they're really trying to be more attuned to the stresses that just being in healthcare um, put onto somebody,
Hmm.
and being more progressive in making sure that we're not just worried if somebody gets the flu, but we're worried about if they're having mental health issues as well.
You mean as professionals taking care of each other, or like within the system, like employers and the general public?
Yeah, I think employers are more sensitive to mental health issues that
Hmm.
their employees are having, especially attenuated by or compounded by the pandemic and stuff. So I
Yeah.
think that it's not a good reason why. I mean, mental health issues are on the rise because of the pandemic
Hmm.
in healthcare workers,
Hmm.
in nurses. But I think it's also forced the industry to recognize that our industry is one of stress
Hmm.
and one that can cause a lot of mental health issues to come to the foreground for people.
Hmm.
And I feel like the pandemic's really brought that idea to the forefront that mental health for healthcare workers is just as important as physical health.
And it's worth taking care of and putting a priority on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that I agree. That is a
Yeah.
positive. Yeah. And I think there's also a mentality of like, we're all in this together that has come out a lot
Hmm.
for nurses that, like, kind of bonds nurses with other nurses
Yeah.
or even just with other first responders, like
Yeah.
other professions, whether that be like EHS or policing or other frontline people who had to deal with the stresses and the unknowns and the constant changes and the threat of COVID being everywhere in the beginning of the pandemic. I think that's also built a better understanding between people,
Hmm.
just kind of that presumed we're in this together mentality
Hmm.
builds bridges.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we've been chatting for a while here. Maybe we should try and
Do,
wrap this up a
do you
little
have like
bit.
a fun question to finish it? Because that was a little bit heavy with the
Well,
pandemic
I
stuff.
was going to say, what would you say to anyone who might be considering nursing?
Don't do it. No, here's what I would say.
Yeah.
Do it and marry yourself another nurse.
Marry another nurse. I mean, it served us pretty well.
I think it's been better than I think marry another nurse versus marrying a doctor. That I think that's what everybody should be aiming for. You double up your benefit, at least in BC, your benefits can be used together, which is fantastic. Unlimited massages, what?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the nursing profession's a great one. I think it can be hard, um, and I think if you go into nursing, you kind of need to have a sense of who you are. Not that
Mm-hmm.
you need to change to be in nursing, but if you
No.
don't have a sense of who you are, nursing will be harder.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's good life advice in general. But
Mm.
yes, nursing really requires you to know yourself, partially because as a professional role, you have to be able to separate what's very like personally you from the role you have as a nurse in the circumstances that you encounter. I think that's really good advice. What's my advice for anyone who might consider nursing? I think it is a great profession that gives you a lot of opportunities to try and do different things so that you won't get bored
Mm.
and you can move about within the profession. Like there's
Yeah.
lots of opportunity for growth, advancement, etc.
Yeah.
And always, always, always the opportunity to have an impact and make a difference
Yeah.
with your day to day.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sitting in a cubicle punching away at a computer thinking,
But if you
does what I
wanted,
do
if you
matter?
wanted to as a nurse,
I
there
could.
are jobs that
There
do
are
that,
jobs that are like that.
right?
There's
That
a lot of opportunities that nursing will open for you within the profession, and even if you choose to move outside of it.
it's not just bedpans and catheters.
It's not just bedpans and catheters.
There's a lot. You can find your niche in nursing.
Yep.
No matter who you are.
And you don't have to be this, super overly nurturing, angelic personality to be a good nurse. In fact, sometimes I would say
you have to be able to tap into that a little bit.
a little bit.
But it doesn't have to be your personality.
It doesn't have to be.
In fact, I would say most nurses at their core aren't those type of people. They've just learned to nurture that part of them for their jobs.
Yeah.
Not saying that nurses are horrendous human beings. I'm just saying I don't think I don't know. I'm just saying I don't think most nurses are the Florence Nightingale in their true personalities. I think that we've learned to encompass that as part of our jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I think if you are considering it, then just know that I think to be a great nurse, you have to be very smart and very kind, and you have to be very determined to find yourself on your days off outside of the profession as much as you spend your time figuring out what kind of professional you are on the days that you're working. Because in order to do this, which is a hard job, which is not a bad thing, it just is reality. It's a hard job. You need to balance that with it's not going to hit every mark for you. It's not going to hit all your values. And it's also not going to be the thing that always gives you life. And you need to find the things in life that give you that joy and keep you going both inside and outside of your professional career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that was pretty good for his podcast.
Hope so.
I think we covered a lot of good stuff.
I think you guys got a little bit of a sense of who we are as nurses, as a couple. And, this is kind of how a lot of our chats are going to go.
Yeah. So hopefully soon you'll be able to find us on maybe like Instagram and stuff as a podcast, just to a way to interact with us more.
Yes, because we're millennials, so it's Instagram.
Yeah, we'll figure something out to be online, and eventually we'll get an intro and an outro, and we'll make it all great. But like I learned from my YouTube thing, you just have to press record and start uploading and get it going. And as we go on, hopefully we'll get a little bit better. And I hope you guys found value in this.
Yeah.
It was fun for us.
Yeah, it was. Nice way to spend a little hour here this afternoon.
Yeah.
Fireplace on, snow falling.
Yeah, and we got to drink our Phil and Sebastian coffee.
Oh, here we go.
Wink,
name
wink.
Drop.
They don't sponsor us, but hey, if you're listening, Phil and Sebastian, you definitely could sponsor us.
You could sponsor us. We do.
It's all we drink in the house.
Yes.
They're good coffee roasters out of Calgary. They ship by mail everywhere in Canada and US.
Subscription based. It's fantastic. That's something to know about us as a couple. We will always budget for good coffee in this household.
Always budget for good coffee.
Always budget for good coffee. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. So we will see you next time on the episode of the 24 Gauge podcast.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.